serve me.
Hello again, my friends. How's everyone doing today? Welcome to Bourbon Over Headlines, where your headlines are served neat. So pour yourself a glass, sit back, and let's enjoy our trip back in time. Once again, Jefferson's Rye, mix it with some Coke, served neat, it's on the rocks, nice and good. So today we're taking a trip back to Scranton. We're going back to the 1920s again, and we're doing Scranton, Pennsylvania. Okay, so Scranton, Pennsylvania, a little bit about it. It's uniquely positioned. It's about 100 miles to Philly and 100 miles to New York City. So right there in the middle. So you got a lot of commerce going back and forth. All right, big on coal mining, especially anthracite coal, which was the big coal thing for generations and generations. First white settler was Isaac Tripp. My bad. The Lackawanna and Western Railroad came through here in 1851. That pretty much established the city. Every time there's a railroad depot, there's a city. I couldn't figure out. I think there's a Scranton family. I couldn't figure out exactly when they moved there, but the town's named after a family called the Scrantons. In the 1920s, a little bit about the city, 1920s, which is the time frame. The Scranton Button Company, which was founded in 1885, started producing something that would, and even to today, it's starting to make a comeback, that changed how we listen to music. It started pressing vinyl records or phonographic records. Think about that. 1920s, this place, and eventually got bought by Capitol in 1946, and it's continued to make vinyl all the way through until very recently. I think it still does in some capacity, but we've had vinyl make a comeback. You see, I got a record player right here. Replica of an old school one. We listen to, in this area, as you see behind me, the music, we listen to vinyl and do all that. The population in 1920 was 137,000 plus. Currently it's about 76,000, so it's gone down as the coal has gone down. It's gone down. Today we got some interesting stories. Okay, I don't know where to start today. So what we're going to start with is this. Chinese warlord has big domestic worries. Now, again, this is one of these stories that's not Scranton. Of course, it's a Chinese warlord, but it's in the Scranton paper, so we're doing it. That's the headline. Shanghai, November 16th, 1928. AP. Chang Song Chang, yeah, that's his name. Bandit military leader, defeated by the nationalists, has, according to the Chinese press, appealed to the Japanese in North China to protect his country. Okay, so in the late 20s, early 30s, Japan was coming into China, taking over China. It had pretty much taken over China. It had beat Russia in the Russo-Japan War. It was starting to take over China. I think yeah. So it was starting to take over China, and really had parts of China taken over all the way through the end of World War II. Remember, Japan wasn't this weakling that we think of it was when it attacked Pearl Harbor in 41. It was a Pacific power. It had gone into China, pretty much taken over all of China, and was trying to get Southeast Asia. So that's why it was really, China was that power. So Chang for years has been known as the master of romance, and during the years he reigned supreme in his region, and impoverished it with taxes. Of course, every warlord's like, we're going to go in and make it better, than end up making it taxes. His headquarters at Sinfanu was famed for the beautiful women part of his house. So basically, he's suing to keep his concubines. Now, if you don't know what a concubine is, it's basically a woman of the house kept for purposes of personal pleasure. Okay, so basically, he had multiple women in the house. Probably wasn't married to any of them, but he did that for whether the pleasure of himself or the pleasure of his guests. He had these women described as beautiful. They were framed as beautiful. So he's saying, I got defeated, but can I keep my concubines? Typical guy, right? It's like, I lost everything, but can I keep all the women in my palace? Can you let me keep my concubines so that when people come over, we can all have a good time? Can we do that? Sounds like a typical guy in certain areas. But I just thought that was funny that he actually appealed to the victors. I want to keep my concubines. I know you're feeding me, but can I keep my concubines? All right, now completely the other way. So next headline I got is the first town clock saved in America saved. So we go back in time. This has a little bit of Back to the Future vibes. Not quite. The clock tower wasn't struck by lightning, but they did save it. And like in Back to the Future, the movie, if you haven't seen it, spoiler alert, everything gets resolved. But the clock tower, when they're in 1955, the reason why it stopped working is because it was struck by lightning. And in the beginning of the movie, they're trying to get enough money to make the clock tower work again. So I saw this and I'm like, great. It's 41 years since the first Back to the Future movie. This is perfect. We're going even farther back in time. So, ancient timepiece found at Guilford, Connecticut, made over 200 centuries ago. The first American town clock was in Guilford, Connecticut, which, of course, the Northeast. If you don't know anything about America, then I know there's people watching from all over. And by the way, thank you to all my new subscribers. I'm shooting up on my way. I want to get 500 before my birthday in August. Birthday's in August. As soon as I get 500, I'll do a Patreon where I'll have extra stuff. I'll lean more into what bourbon is, do histories of distilleries, do that. Maybe even put on longer stuff on the bigger cities like New York, Chicago, those stuff. That will be on my Patreon because those will be long episodes where I will do that. But I'll also do the history of bourbon, distilleries, stuff like that. Interesting stuff on my Patreon. But I'm not going to do it until I get 500 subscribers. So if you want to learn about the history of bourbon, distilleries, and for me to do the iconic cities of America, New York, Chicago, San Francisco, LA, Miami, all those big cities, help me get to that goal so we can do it on Patreon. So this clock was made of wood, which back in the 1700s was made of wood. They had and these clock towers, if you don't know, they were the official timepiece. That's where everybody set their watches to, set their pocket watches to. You would look at the time, set your timepiece to the clock tower. Everything was set by the clock tower. There was usually one or two people. They made sure it kept being worked on, make sure it kept time. Everything else, so everything revolved around the clock tower time-wise. If you had an appointment, you made sure you were made it by the clock tower. That's how important these clock towers were. So they're trying to save it. They did save it. They put it on the history of historic places. They saved it. They put a marker on it saying it was historic. In fact, it says they're the only town clock in the colonies. Just as soon as the new church was finished, members of the congregation began to make its plans for the tower as well. The bell was secured. And that's how the bells rang. You know, bells are set to the clock. A clock, they're set every hour, every quarter hour. They have to have a clock. So usually clock towers are in churches. So it was one of the, if not the only one of the rare ones in the thing. It was built and it was saved. They saved it hundreds of years after it was built. So something nice, unique they did back then is that they saved that clock tower, made sure it was preserved. I don't know if it's still on it. I think it is. I couldn't find out if it's still there. If you want to put in the comments below if you're from Guilford, Connecticut and that clock tower is still there, that'd be perfect. If you want to tell me if it's still there, great. From the cursory research, it was a little, I couldn't tell if it was still there, if it was still not, or if it was functioning, whatever. So that's that. Now we're gonna go to the air. We're gonna go flying today, but we're not gonna go by plane. We're gonna go by zeppelin. So back in the 20s, up until the Hindenburg, we all know the Hindenburg, right? Big fireball. The guy says, "Oh, the humanity!" That guy, that's the Hindenburg. So, but that was a way of traveling. Do you remember plane? The first motorized plane was 1903 with the Wright brothers in North Carolina and Kitty Hawk. 1925, 26, I believe, was Lindbergh. I think it was 27. 27 was Lindbergh. 25, 27 was Lindbergh. I think it was 27 though. Was Lindbergh crossing the Atlantic by himself as a solo flight? That was in the late 20s, mid to late 20s. So you couldn't just hop across and go across the country or go long distances in planes like we know today, where you hop on and it's. So they did Zeppelins. Now Zeppelins are basically huge, what we would call airships, but blimps. So anyone here seen the Goodyear blimp, or a blimp over a big sporting event, Super Bowl, World Cup games? They have the blimp flying on to get those nice aerial shots. Yeah, these things were bigger than that. The Zeppelins, of course, were German, because the Germans, despite their faults, are always great at engineering. They're known for their engineering. Okay, so, but this is the USS Los Angeles, the US airship, not the USS. The USS, it's over Bermuda. A recent visit there. It's the first time it was outside the United States since its arrival from Germany. So we brought it over. It flew across the United States. This is the first time it's been outside the United States. Now, interesting. Going back to New York City. If you look at the Empire State Building, okay, you ever notice why is there a walkway on top of the very top of it? Not the antenna, but below that there's a walkway. Why is that walkway there? Why are there walkways? Because initially, before the Hindenburg and before their stuff, that was built, the Empire State Building was built as a docking station for Zeppelins. You're going to fly in, dock in the Empire State, you come down the Empire State Building, you were right there in the heart of the city. That's why that's there. That walkway could come down, they could put the game plan to it, you walk in, you go down. That's how that was designed. Now, these Zeppelins were luxury airships. Has anyone ever seen an Indiana Jones movie? They're flying in a Zeppelin. That's what they're flying in. They're not flying in a plane. They're flying in a Zeppelin. That's what they're flying in. So they were luxury, fine dining, everything else. Personally, I love to travel, and to me, I think this would be a great way to travel in today's games, is that it's low enough where you could dock at certain places. It'd be nice, calm. You're in the air. You're not as high as 30,000 feet in the air. It'd be a nice way to just go across country, avoid traffic, avoid everything else. It'd be like an air cruise, like a cruise ship but in the air, basically. Go across the Atlantic in a Zeppelin. It'd be nice. I'm sure they could make them huge and make them safe in today's world. The only reason why they stopped was the Hindenburg, and the Hindenburg, I think not that many people died. I think under 10 people died in the Hindenburg explosion. That big explosion, not that many people died. I think 3 passengers and like 2 crew people died. It was under 10. It wasn't like this big, it was a tragic disaster and killed the airships. But not that, it wasn't a great loss of life. But I just found it funny that the airship Los Angeles is visiting Bermuda, basically. So what a cruise ship does today. They'll leave from Florida, visit Bermuda, visit the Bahamas, and go from there and dock. I think it'd be kind of fun to go on one today. But I doubt that'll happen. And to sort of do that, if you wanted to shoot down the airship, I got just the person for you. One Miss Annie Oakley. Annie Oakley, known as Little Miss Sir Shot. So this is from 1921. This is later in her career. She died in 1926. A wonderful exposition of sharpshooting and fancy and trick shooting was given by the world champion lady shooter Miss Annie Oakley on the grounds of the Water Gap Gun Club Tuesday afternoon, to immense satisfaction of everybody present. It was held by the proprietor of the hotel, so basically what it was is that there was a bunch of Catholic priests in town, which is weird to begin with. So the Catholic priests were holding an annual retreat at this hotel in Scranton. I don't know why you're going to Scranton for a damn hotel. It's funny that this happened in Scranton. And so the proprietor of the hotel, to show off, I guess, to hold an event for these priests since they were there, hired a sharpshooter. Now, Annie Oakley's a sharpshooter, and we're talking about, like, she performed for Queen Victoria, Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany, royalty all throughout. Okay? I mean, the late 1800s, early 1900s, pretty much. She was born in 1860, so pretty much when she was a teenager, like 13, 14, 15, she started getting fame. First time she really got fame was Cincinnati. Again, all this is coming back. I did an episode on Cincinnati. If you want to look back, I'll probably post it here. When we get done here, I'll post it here. Episode on Cincinnati called Presidents in Baseball, the Cincinnati Way. So in 1885, okay, there was a sharpshooting group in town led by Frank Butler, who was a sharpshooter, also died in 1926. Challenged a local hotel guy. Again, back then, hotel guys, they were the people who they had the money, they put on these expositions for their guests or for special people. He challenged Frank Butler to $100. Frank Butler challenged him to $100, which is about $2,900 today, that he could beat any fancy shooter that the hotel guy could come up with in the region, okay? Now, there's different accounts of when this happened. Some say 1881, some say 1875. Either way, she's either 15 or 21. Either way, okay? Annie Oakley won. He brought in Annie Oakley. She beat him. Frank Butler had to give the guy $100. So that's the beginning of that. Yes, Butler and Annie Oakley do get married. They're only 12 years apart. So it's not a huge age gap, especially back then. But actually, they did live in Cincinnati. Annie Oakley and Frank Butler lived in Cincinnati for a while. In 1885, Annie Oakley, along with, of course, Frank Butler, but mostly Annie, went on to be Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. In fact, Annie, being the sharpshooter, being the spectacular person, she got paid more than anyone else but Buffalo Bill, and that's because his name, he organized the show, and his name was his show. So she got paid more than everybody else, all the other cowboys, all the other people. Now this is famous for having Sitting Bull, everybody else, and that's how she supposedly got the nickname Little Sir Shot, was from Sitting Bull, who was part of Buffalo Bill's Wild West. And so Buffalo Bill's Wild West show brought a version of the Wild West. It brought Indians, rodeo, calf roping, sharpshooting, all the stuff we associate with the West. They staged stagecoach robberies, all that stuff. They put it in a troupe. They went all across the country, east, overseas, to England and the continent, Europe, the continent. That's why she did for Kaiser Wilhelm, Queen Victoria, pretty much European royalty, which at some point was all related anyway. Supposedly, she shot ashes off a cigarette of Kaiser Wilhelm of Germany's. He had a cigarette in his mouth. She shot the ashes of it. Okay. And just an interesting side note: she just wasn't doing this Buffalo Bill stuff and doing that. She taught approximately, they're saying, whether it's directly or indirectly, 15,000 women, girls and women, how to properly shoot firearms. Now we don't have someone doing this today. There's no one out there going around using as a sharpshooter or whatever, going around teaching people how to properly use guns. I'm in America, so in America we have a gun culture. My biggest issue with the gun culture is that we're not teaching people how to properly use guns from a younger age. Because it's not just about using them, it's about respecting them, understanding them. And whether you agree we should have guns or not, that's not the point. The point is, if you have one or you're going to have one, you need to properly learn how to use it. And she taught 15,000 back in the 1920s, different time, a lot of rural areas, you still had to hunt for food, how to properly shoot and handle a gun. That's amazing. Now she died in 1926 of old age. Another interesting side note with her is there was a story published that she was addicted to cocaine or morphine or whatever, especially after an accident. She had a couple accidents that towards the end of her career, she didn't travel as much, she didn't do as much. I mean, like, hurt her hip. I mean, like, debilitated her to the point where she was barely able to walk. And so back then, they prescribed morphine and other stronger substances than they do today for pain. So someone says she was addicted. She sued them for libel. She won. I read somewhere she had like 100+ lawsuits. I think it was 115 libel lawsuits. She won everything but one. She lost one libel lawsuit. It's a hell. She, only because she shoot really well and not miss. She would, if you got sued by her, you probably lost too. But that's just funny that she was in Scranton doing her shooting thing. Yeah, she would throw a card up in the air, and this was with a rifle, it wasn't with a pistol. Shoot the card out, shoot, throw coins up, quarters, shoot the quarters, stuff like that. Moving targets, as I said, shooting the ashes supposedly off the cigarette off Kaiser Wilhelm, stuff like that. She was one of those accurate shooters in that time frame, if not in history, for as far as we know. Now, if you shoot a zeppelin down, you have the zeppelin. If you shoot it down, that's illegal. You're gonna get caught, and now you're gonna get caught by a woman because we have police women. From Wilkes-Barre, which is around here, Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, it's around here. It's close by. It'll be well worthwhile to make an experiment with police women in Wilkes-Barre. In some places where women have been appointed to the force, they perform certain duties with eminent satisfaction. At least nothing can be lost in granting the request made by the women of various organizations who have petitioned the council. Women can be invaluable service if they do what the men of the police force will not do. So they're wanting local police women in Wilkes-Barre. Other areas in the area have done it. This is the 1921. You remember in the United States in 1920, women had just gotten the right to vote. This is this big, let's give women's suffrage movement. They just got the right to vote. Coming off World War I, we're 3 years off World War I, not even 3 years off World War I. Again, during World War I and World War II, women showed and proved they could do the jobs men could do. They could work the factories, do all that to help with the war. So now it's in policemen, which again, I think is a great idea. Because if you're a woman, you'd rather talk to a woman than a guy. For various reasons. I get that. If something's happening, whatever it is, you'd rather talk to a woman than a guy. A lot of women are like that. I get that. But I think the undercoating of this is they're not going to be necessarily on the beat. They're not going to be walking and patrolling at this point. They do now. Like, speaking of last night down here where I live in Florida, me and my amazing wife, who, by the way, has 2 channels of her own, Moondog Tarot and the Divine 222. So if you want to go ahead and you know someone who's into tarot, if you are someone who's into astrology and stuff, have them go check out her channels. We went to a fountain. It has a nice fountain. They made a nice park out of it where they had some music playing, live music from 3 hours on a Saturday night. This is being filmed on a Sunday. And walking the area, they had a couple police people just walking the park occasionally, patrolling it. And one of them was a woman. Just walking around, making sure no one was doing any issues, nothing illegal was happening, no one was smoking anything illegal, doing anything illegal, whatever. Which is great. I think let's do it all. The fact that they're wanting women to be cops back then in the 1920s, perfect. Do I think we need more? I think we need more women cops. I think we need more cops in general, but that's not here or there. But I think it's amazing that in 1921, we have Amy Oakley teaching women how to shoot. We have women wanting to be police. We have people petitioning for police women. Now, you shot down a Zeppelin. All right. You're a sure shot. You shot down a Zeppelin. You got arrested by the police woman. Now you're going to be in front of a judge. What do you not do in front of a judge? You're in court. You're in arraignment. First of all, this is what you don't do. You don't disrespect the judge. Now, this story is about a guy, of course, remember, 1920s. This is the 1920s. This is Prohibition. So, can't make alcohol. This guy was caught making alcohol, having a home still. He's in front of the judge. Judge was going to let him off easy. He was going to let him off with a minor fine. Let's see. The guy Lucas entered a plea of guilty to the illegal sale of whiskey and had been fined $300 and sentenced to 2 months in the county jail. So, judge let him off easy. Now, this guy, thinking, oh, this is easy, in a snarky tone, said, "Thank you, Judge." Said, thank you, Mr. Judge. Apparently in a snarky tone. Said, your honor, said Mr. Judge. Remarked Lucas as he was being escorted from the room by the United States Marshals. Okay, so we have to remember, the United States Marshals, anything that was under the Volstead Act, which was the act passed after the Prohibition Amendment, was the actual arm, was the act that they could go and prosecute people and arrest people under. U.S. Marshals handled all the arresting. U.S. Marshals, everybody, that was the U.S. federal government. So sorry, it's a really small type. The remark was made in a tone that left grave doubt as to the manner in which it was intended. So basically he was being sarcastic and snarky. And I know all about being sarcastic and snarky. Ask anyone who knows me. I'm probably one of the most sarcastic people they know, but I'm not going to do it in front of a judge. You have to be smart about it. So Judge Whitner heard it and immediately ordered that Lucas be brought back to the courtroom. He then announced that Lucas would be fined $1,000 and spend 1 year in jail. So he doubled the fine and put him a whole year in jail. In the county, and that is, in the future, Lucas might have more respect for the court. So don't disrespect the judge, especially when he was light on you. Okay, so those are the stories we have now. I've mentioned Annie Oakley, Frank Butler, but let's see what famous people we have from Scranton. First of all, President Joe Biden, former President Biden, former Vice President Joe Biden was born in Scranton. Yes, he moved to Delaware and he was elected from Delaware as a senator, but he was born in Scranton, Pennsylvania. So I wonder where his presidential library is going to be. Is it going to be in Scranton or is it going to be in Delaware when he gets one? But he was born in Scranton. Nice. Now, what I did not know is you got Sonny Burke was a big band leader. Now this is the 20s and 30s. Big band was big. Pat Crowley and Ann Crowley were sisters. They were actors from the 30s to the 80s. Okay, so they had 50 years career. Both of them were sisters. Now we're gonna get into some what I found super interesting. Not that President Biden's interesting, but apparently Scranton, Pennsylvania, was the birthplace or the place where a lot of companies were founded. Some are still around, some aren't. But apparently people were either born here or founded this place here. Let's begin. Alex Grass, founder of Rite Aid. Okay, so Rite Aid. Rite Aid, if you don't know in America, is a pharmacy. It's like a Walgreens, like a CVS type of store. Go in and do that. That's what it is. It's been around. Founded in 1962. He was born in 1927, died in 2004. Now, Charles Sumner Woolworth. That name should sound familiar. Not the first two, but the last name. Woolworth. Woolworth store. 5 and dime stores. Now, so, for those of you who don't understand, there was a 20s, 30s, 50s, probably up until Walmart got big. Okay. Local towns had what they call 5 and dime stores. Basically, everything in there was 5 or 10 cents. You could go in there. Also, a lot of them had dining areas, which were a little bit more. They had dining areas. In fact, I think a famous sit-in during the Civil Rights era was done at a Woolworths in the South. I think it was in Alabama, where they sat in and said they wouldn't serve certain people in the South. They were segregated. They wouldn't serve black people, so they sat in a Woolworths counter and basically sat there and said service or whatever. That was at a Woolworths, I believe. But he was the co-founder with his brother. Okay, it was a 5 and dime store. Founded in 1879. It was incorporated in 1905. The last Woolworth closed in 1997. So it had a run. Having a 5 and dime store in 19. But here's the interesting part. The company, Woolworths closed, but the company, the incorporation, bought a little company in the 1960s that we might have heard of today, but in the 1960s wasn't bad. And this is one of the brands they sold. So Woolworths sold different brands. One of the brands they sold was Foot Locker. So they bought the company that owned Foot Locker out completely. They became Foot Locker. So the company that owned Woolworths closed, but all that company ended up being Foot Locker became the flagship. Now, Anyone in America, maybe I don't know if it's overseas, but I know in America, you go to any mall, you go to a lot of places like that where there's a collection of stuff, you got Foot Lockers. I've seen them in strip malls, I've seen them in regular malls, Foot Locker stores. They're still around. It's a shoe clothing store. It's an athletic shoe and clothing store. Okay, you're not going to go in there and buy a nice collared shirt, button-down shirt. You're going to get your Nikes, you're going to get your Adidas pants, or New Balance shoes, or whatever. It's an athletic store. So, Foot Locker first came out in 1912 as a brand under a different name, but it was so in 2012 it celebrated its 10th anniversary. Think about that. Foot Locker, the brand, has been around for over 100 years. Anyone else know that? Let's see what else. Anyone here ever heard of Banana Republic? That, like, the term of a Banana Republic where it's a Banana Republic's basically a dictator who doesn't know what they're doing. Think of Borat, the dictator in Borat. That's a Banana Republic type guy. He's a dictator, doesn't really know what he's doing, he's just there. But the store Banana Republic. So Max Ziegler Mel Ziegler founded Banana Republic in 1976. So him and his co-founder, Mel Ziegler was born in Scranton. That's why I'm saying this. He was born in Scranton. Where LA Times, he went to LA Times travel columnist, traveled all the world, did some travel stuff. So the concept of Banana Republic was they would get clothes and styles and get access to styles and stuff from, around the world. Okay, I need a drink real quick. So what they decided to do was form a store, okay, that would incorporate all these styles so that people in the U.S. could get all these styles in one place. So they founded the store in 1976. The Gap brand, Gap, bought Banana Republic from Max Ziegler and his partner in 1983. By 1988, Ziegler had lost creative control. So in 1988, Banana Republic came to what it is today, which is a more luxury, like surf brand, I guess. I don't really shop at Banana Republic. I don't have a lot in my size. I'm a big guy. I'm 6'3". I wear like 2X, 3X shirts. I'm tall. I need certain pants. They don't really have what I want in my size, sadly. Mike Dunleavy, not the basketball player and GM of the Warriors, the governor of Alaska, okay? The Alaska governor, he's currently 65. He moved to Alaska in 1983 for work, okay? He loved it there. He's now the current governor of Alaska. He was born in Scranton. So we have a president, a governor. We have one of the most iconic Americana stores ever, which branched into Foot Locker. We have Banana Republic and Rite Aid. All Scranton ties. This is amazing. Now, there's more. We have two baseball players. Jimmy Pearsall, who is also an actor. He was born in 1929, died in 2017. Played from 1950 to 1967. Jim O'Neill, born in 1893 to dead in 1976, played for the Washington Senators in the 20s, which might have been the only time the Senators were actually good. The Senators actually were good in the 1920s. So, a little history. If you follow baseball at all, currently there's a team in Washington called the Washington Nationals. That is the third baseball team in Washington. And arguably the most successful. Okay. Third baseball team in Washington. So, as a founding member of the National League, American League in 1901, there was a team called the Washington Senators, owned by Clark Griffin. It's very similar setup to a team I mentioned before, the Philadelphia Athletics, which I mentioned a little bit in my Sacramento episode, because they're now playing in Sacramento. After they moved to Kansas City, they moved to Oakland, now they're going to be in Vegas. Big thing with the A's. But I mentioned them. Connie Mack was the owner, did everything with them. He had some sponsors, but mostly it was Connie Mack. Same with Clark Griffin, former player, founded the team, was the sole, that was what that team, that's what they did. There was nothing else going on. They own massive hotel. They didn't own businesses. They didn't own Amazon. They weren't a Microsoft guy. They weren't anything else, a radio guy, whatever, TV guy. They just did baseball. So the Senators, again, had very good players, but were very bad. They were horrible for years and years and years. They had one of the most famous players ever, Walter Johnson, spent his entire 20-year career in Washington. They were good in the mid to late 20s, like 24 through 28. They were good. They won one World Series and didn't finish last place, which for the Senators was good. So the original Senators moved to Minnesota, moved to Minneapolis, became the Twins. Ironically, as soon as they became the Twins, they got good because they had some really young players. But Clark Griffith sold the team. The team got moved to Minnesota. Those young players matured, became really good. That was the 60s Twins. Now, Major League Baseball not wanting to have a team, not wanting to have the national, the capital of the country, the national capital, Washington, D.C., without a baseball team. Okay, you can have the national pastime, team in the nation's capital. Okay. They put a new Senators team in Washington. Okay. Maybe the most notable thing that happened there was Ted Williams managed it. That might have been it. They were worse than the original team based on expectations. They brought some players in that should have been really good, that weren't. Maybe a little past their prime, but maybe make sure they had 1 or 2 years left. It was just the 60s. So they brought in guys from that era. One of the most notable players, not necessarily known for baseball, but known for baseball adjacent stuff, was Curt Flood, who helped carve out free agency for baseball, which began the free agency thing, and free agency in all sports. Baseball was the first one to get it. That team left to form the Texas Rangers. Okay. Now that happened. They didn't put a baseball team back in DC until the early 2000s. I think late 90s. The Nationals. When the Nationals started, I don't remember when they started. I think it was late 90s, early 2000s. They put one back in Washington. And that team's actually it's one of the World Series has been pretty good. So, teams in Washington, playing in the Washington Center, playing in Washington, or in the nation's capital, whatever, have won 2 World Series in Washington. Teams, the Senators that have moved, Twins have won 3 series. Yeah, 3. What series? The Rangers have won 1. So the teams that have moved have won more World Series than the teams that actually have been in Washington. Another notable guy, B.F. Skinner. So B.F. Skinner is a famed behavioral psychologist. Ever heard of Skinner boxes? Basically saying that you can train people to behave a certain way based on things. He was a behaviorist. So if every day at a certain time you eat, you train your body to be hungry at that time, that's a behavior that was learned. You can unlearn it. What's behind that? Basically, anyone ever heard of Pavlov's dogs? That's a behavioral thing. Skinner took that to a different degree and made it more operational to see if it could work with humans and everything. Did that. He got a PhD from Harvard in 1931. He was born in 1904, died in 1990. He was a behaviorist known for his Skinner boxes, which put an animal in there, and basically they had to do certain things to get food and water. Those are the Skinner boxes. Still done today. Various forms of behaviorist psychology is done today. He was basically one of the big names in that. That's all I have for you. We're going to end on Skinner and behavior boxes. So remember, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you get all the new things. Also, I am on Spotify now. So I know there are people who, you're at work, you want to listen to this, you can't always watch it on video at YouTube. And I also know that YouTube, unless you have YouTube Premium or some form of YouTube where you have background watching on a video, it's hard to watch it and do other things on your phone or watch it with your phone on its home screen. So I'm starting to put these starting now on Spotify. That way you can put your headphones in, listen to the audio. Don't have to worry about the video. If you want to watch the video later, you're fine on YouTube. But I am also on Spotify at Bourbon Over Headlines. Just search Bourbon Over Headlines. You'll find the show. So until next time, Drink responsibly and be neat, my friends. Have a great night.